So our first panel is on tattoos and perfume. And it will be introduced and moderated by our beloved Professor Deanna Sorensen. Our colleagues here know her well, but Deanna is James Rothenberg Professor of Romance Languages and Literatures and Professor of Comparative Literature at Harvard. And until recently, and of course, a very distinguished scholar of Latin American literature. Until recently, she was Dean of the Humanities at Harvard, and I would say probably in my 30 years of experience in universities, probably the most beloved administrator I've ever encountered. So, Professor Sorensen.
Thank you, Hisa. I remember very fondly the beginning of our conversations about this conference, and I want to say that seeing what you did with those early thoughts, which were aspirational and somewhat messy, seeing what it's turned into is a very real pleasure. Our panel this morning is focused on two areas that the Academy needs to pursue more consistently and more deeply. So I trust that our conversation this morning will give us a full sense of what work could be done, furthering our understanding of both tattoos and scent. And as Professor Peters just marvelously stated just now, I want to have us think about the extent to which every medium reorganizes embodiment. And here we're looking at skin. Skin will be the medium through which scent and tattoos are inscribed, if one could use that word that comes from my own textual background. So you have the speakers' bios, so I don't want to take time away from hearing their presentations. Simply want to say they will be relatively brief. Then we'll have a short conversation, and there will be time for questions and answers from all of you. About Chandler Burr, I want to just point to two really fascinating and important books. One of 2003, The Emperor of Scent, about the whole mystery of the obsession with perfume, and one of 2008 that's called The Perfect Scent, and it deals with the industry in both New York and in Paris. Afterwards, we will hear the presentation of Dominique Holmes, who's a London-based artist, got one important book of 2013 called The Painted Lady, The Art of Tattooing the Female Body. And I'm eagerly awaiting a book that's expected for 2020 with the preliminary title Painted Ones. And it includes as well an exhibition. So I would like to invite Dominique and Chandler to join me up here.
Am I here?
You're there.
I don't know. I was told I'm somewhere.
So I believe you.
Do I launch into it?
Please.
Okay. So, ready, guys? Okay. So what's interesting? I met this guy in the Gare du Nord in 1998. I'm a journalist. I actually have a background in Japanese political economy, and Asian studies. And I was doing some work. You can go. Yeah, hand them out. Thank you. Now this is the first work that we're going to smell. Okay. I got into this, and I really sort of fell into it. I met this guy in the Gare du Nord. He is an expert of perfume, and he was absolutely brilliant. And I wound up writing a book about him. He's a scientist, and he was working on a biophysical theory of how we smell, because we don't actually know how we smell. We don't understand how it works. But at the same time, the reason he was working on it is, don't you have you have a blotter? You know, we don't think about the art form that scent is a medium. Scent is one of the most important mediums, artistic mediums in the world, and it is unrecognized. And it's extraordinary. I would posit to you that scent is a medium that is right now in the stage of recognition by the Academy, gallerists, museums, the public, as photography was in the 1950s and 60s. And photography was viewed as being, you know, this craft, this sort of interesting thing that basically you had a photograph and you had some reality, and it was about as artistic as looking in a mirror or seeing somebody else, you know, reflected in a glass. It was just not recognized as artistic at all. And then we came to understand that actually every photograph is a lie. And the lie in the best sense. Cindy Sherman, there was this wonderful biography of her, and she was asked why, because she used to be a painter, and then she started photography, and she was asked, well, why did you switch? And she sort of thought about it, and she said, I don't know, I guess it was easier to lie with the camera, you know? And all art is artificial, in the best sense. It has to be. It has to be. Because it has to have a mind behind it that has a point of view, that has a desire to create a reality, to present something to you, to force you to perceive the world in the way that it wants you to. All right? Now, this is one of the most extraordinary works of olfactory art in the past 20 years, or even more. This is a neo-romanticist work by an artist named Pierre Legrand, who is brilliant, and it is it's a relatively recent work. As a matter of fact, I should know I'm forgetting the year right now, but it came out, and it was I think that this is the greatest, an extraordinary and masterpiece in several ways. First of all, as with everything, paint, and by the way, scent is the equal of paint and clay and music and architecture and film. It is absolutely the equal of those. And it is also understood in this highly developed vocabulary that we have for art. It fits in my purpose. I created the Department of Olfactory Art at the Museum of Arts and Design in New York. Before that, I was the New York Times art critic, and this was the medium, the works created in this, okay? So I think that we really need to understand this as a work. It fits into the schools of art as we understand them. Do you smell how, if you think about Romanticism, everything the Romanticists believed, both in literature and music and the other mediums, and those are very different mediums, but Romanticism is represented in them. Not every school is represented in every medium. In this case, it was mostly literature and music. But this is a work of Romanticism. Romanticists rejected rationality emphatically. They rejected thought as the source of logic and rationale and these sorts of things as a way to find truth. And this, I find, is non-structured. It is not abstract expressionist because it has very, very specific real-world references. You smell the certain things. There is and I hate, and we apply such a poor vocabulary to this medium, this artistic medium, because it is not recognized as such yet. And we reduce it to notes and sort of stupid things like that. It's so moronic. Well, what are the notes? Well, I mean, Jesus, look at a Rembrandt. Well, what are the colors? Oh, here's black and here's red. Oh, there's a little yellow. Who gives a damn? It's a Rembrandt. You don't wear the color, you don't look at the colors, you look at the painting, you look at the work. You do not wear the notes or, and this is the correct way to say it, raw materials, okay? You wear the work of art, and you wear it on skin, and it's made for skin. As a matter of fact, we were talking, and this is something that's very interesting that I'm paired with Dominique, because this is the only other art medium that is created to be worn on an extraordinarily weird canvas, human skin. Okay? Now, this is wonderful. Gender, I've written about this a lot. Look, gender is very, very specific in this medium. Scent art was never gendered. It is ridiculous. The perfumers, olfactory artists hate it. They hate it. They're not allowed to talk about it overtly because they basically work for corporations who want to sell this. Scent medium is a medium that is hugely colonized by, damn it, how much time do I have?
You have, I can tell you, you're left with 5.5.
5.5, okay, thank you. Well, keep me on this. So I'm just going to say this and we're going to do the next one. They hate, you know, one of the greatest olfactory artists, Jean-Claude Ellena, said to me, in private, but now I'll out him. He said, what about music? He said, is Bartók for men and Beethoven for women? Is Radiohead for women and the Beatles for men? I mean, it's ridiculous on its face. So why do we do it with this? For one very, very specific reason. Post-war, one of the things that American companies wanted to do, perfume is one of the greatest ways, along with film, by the way. Film is another medium that's hugely colonized by corporate interests. Warner Brothers, Paramount, Fox, you know, 20th Century Fox, and so on, Disney, and that's fine. That's fine, and they're great works of art that are actually made by these companies. Toy Story made $1 billion, $2 billion, whatever it is. It's the most commercial film in a way that you've ever seen. It is a work of art. It's extraordinary at the same time. Okay, this was made to make money. All art is created to make money. Okay, let's be clear about that. But this is gorgeous. After the war, you wanted to make money. It's an incredibly lucrative medium. The only reason that you had suddenly perfume was gendered is that they wanted to sell perfume to a culture, to men in a culture that had no culture, no history of scent as an art, which is, of course, American culture. And so what they did was they divided it into masculines and feminines. And they were basically, if it said for him, that is only giving heterosexual men psycho-emotional permission to wear scent. It's the only reason it exists. Next one. Okay, so this is, notice I don't want to get into I'm going to tell you later, but I don't want to get into it right now. I don't want to talk about the brand. I don't want to talk about the creative director, who in this case is actually very, very important, okay? Please keep these separate. Remember that you're smelling the second one. Put the first one in your pocket or somewhere else. You're welcome to keep it, but I just don't want you to confuse it. Okay, now this is, do you sense how different this is as a work of art? We have gone from Rachmaninoff to, if you will, Philip Glass.
Yes.
This is a work of minimalism. It presents as a whole. The work of Romanticism, it's huge. It was going in every single direction. It was speaking loudly. It was singing. There was texture to it. It was absolutely extraordinary. Okay, this is something. Minimalism as a philosophy really was not just simplicity. Simplicity was part of it, but minimalism philosophically really was an effort. How much time do I have?
2.5.
Okay, we're fine. So minimalism was a way of presenting just the material and the beauty of the material. And this is a combination of both. This is a presentation of the materials, which, again, I'm not going to get into because it doesn't matter. Maybe it does matter. one of the materials in this case, maybe it's legitimate now. I just hate it so much that I want to get away from it. Okay, so I'm being extremist. I'm taking an extremist position. If you look at a work of architecture, you know, Renzo Piano's, at the New York Times, for example, where I worked. I mean, it's very interesting, the materials that he used. And you could talk about the materials, but only in the service of understanding the overall work of architecture. So to understand this, there's a molecule in here that's very interesting. They're called, they're like 3-benzyl 4-hexyl, whatever the hell it is. Sorry about that. But, you know, they're called lactones, lactic acid milk. Do you smell that? Do you smell the milky quality? It's a very, very interesting presentation of it. I think that it's also sort of, there's sort of a wood aspect to it. 1 minute. Let's go out with the last one. But it is as if you were playing one note, la, and maybe there's some more to it. Is the first work masculine, the second work feminine? Again, ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. It makes no sense, and it denigrates the medium to think of it in those terms. Now, this is one of my favorite works of olfactory art. Isn't this freaking great? Becky told me I can't use the F word, but it's freaking great. Is that amazing?
It's glorious.
So this is interesting because this is a work of neo, if you will. No, I don't. I think it's best understood as a work of hyper-realism. It is a realist portraiture. And I'm actually going to ask you, what is this? This is an olfactory photograph. What is it a photograph of? Lilac, exactly. Yeah. The artist is, oh my gosh, I forgot. The artist of the Dries Van Noten. Who the hell, now I can't remember, the perfumer, who is... Frederick let us down. He didn't put the name of the artist. Now I can't remember. I think, I'm going to go out on a limb. I think it was Bruno Jovanovic. I think. God help me if I'm wrong. Bruno is very, very interesting. He's a relatively young artist, but this is just extraordinary. And this artist is one of the great, great olfactory artists of the late 20th, early 21st centuries. Her name is Olivia Jacobetti, and she has created here a work of hyper-realism. Realism because you can tell that it's lilac. But the way that it's presented is, then again, a way that a hyper-realist painter would present that visually, or a hyper-realist photograph. You think of Mapplethorpe's, oh, how much time do I have? Am I over?
Yes.
Okay, I'm over. So last comment. Mapplethorpe's flowers. Those are not just flowers. You see a flower, you see so much more. The symbolism of this. This is extraordinary. It is not just real. It is not just immediate. It is hyper real. It is something that's over. It is an experience of the object, very specific object in this case, which the others were not, that forces you to reconceive reality, like all art should.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you make these last all day?
The length of time that a work of olfactory art lasts, it depends on its composition, its construction, and the technical mastery of the artist.
Well, thank you again so much, Chandler. Now, let me turn it over to Dominique Holmes and tattoos.
When modern tattooing started to emerge in the Western culture in the late 19th century, it was predominantly men who were getting tattooed, but this was pretty much just down to the greater autonomy they were afforded. But the early 20th century saw women such as Jessie Knight and Maud Stevens breaking the mold and becoming very much respected collectors and tattooers in their own right. But the 1920s signified the first significant shift in the demographic of the tattooed individual. But also, significantly, the first example of tattoos being used as a political statement. The rise of the suffragette movement saw many society women seeking out tattoos as a way to symbolize their crusade, and they would wear them very proudly as a mark of their rebellion and their independence. And this impact that they had led to tattoos becoming much more popular amongst both men and women of all social backgrounds, especially as tattoos kind of developed these very romantic and patriotic connotations throughout the war. However, the 1960s saw a very dramatic shift in the attitudes towards tattoos. The growing association of tattooing with gang culture and the criminal underworld led to an extreme masculinization of the aesthetic. And around the same time, an alarming hepatitis outbreak combined with this and really sent tattooing underground, where it became synonymous with the misfits of society. But then what we see again, the emergence of the sexual revolution and the women's liberation movement led to non-conformist women of all social and political backgrounds looking for ways to sort of dismantle the preconceived ideas of femininity. And what better way to do this than by marking your body with something which had come to represent the height of extreme masculinity. In 1970, Janis Joplin very publicly declared that the tattoo she wears on her wrist was a mark of women's liberation. Now, her artist, Lyle Tuttle, who's very, very well-known, well-respected tattooer, he later went on to describe how the number of women he tattooed following on from Joplin increased so dramatically that he actually credited her with the shift in the acceptance of tattoos within mainstream culture. I'm going to start to introduce you to some of my clients as we go as well. The anti-feminist backlash that arose in the 80s saw the media start to promote a very demure, submissive, and passive appearance and expression for women. And this very sort of hyper-feminine appearance became the aspirational aesthetic. And alongside this, the rebellious nature of tattooing and the connotations that it had with these revolutionary, strong, rebellious women saw it really become the antithesis of this expected behavior. And what we've seen is this stigma it was given has been very hard to shift even all these years later. As we entered the 21st century, the rise in the social, the mainstream sort of appreciation, I suppose, of tattooing, has seen it become more popular than it's ever been before. A study conducted by the Dahlia Research Center in Germany last year has found that more than a third of adults across the world are now believed to be tattooed. And interestingly, for the first time, women actually outnumber men. But the study also found that women are almost twice as likely to feel and to receive judgmental and negative comments and attitudes about their tattoos than men. These lists are examples of words used to describe tattoos, either for men or for women, on a very basic internet search. Now, these extreme contrasts depict the gendering of tattoo and tattoo imagery that we've seen emerge alongside its surge in popularity. But the words are also very much synonymous with our society's expectations on the behaviors of the two binary genders. When we think about the toughness and the strength and the rebellion that are associated with tattooing, these are also things that are associated with aspirational male behavior. And so, as we've seen, tattoos have been a very welcomed part of male culture for generations. But these words and these ideas very much oppose expected standards of behavior projected onto women. And so what we see is, for women, every tattoo acts as a political statement, whether intentional or not. And this is why they've become so embraced as a way to reject these gendered expectations projected onto them. Now I'm going to take you back to the 1990s for a moment and back to the growing trend amongst women for lower back tattoos. Now, it's unknown exactly when the phrase was first coined, but this style of tattooing would go on to be better known as the tramp stamp. Now, this offensive term and the many other equally sexist and derogatory alternatives that you can see, this is a list from Urban Thesaurus, and I've actually had to cut it down because there were so many, and some of them were actually I felt too offensive to put up there. But this is an example of the slut-shaming and the misogyny that is directed towards women who choose to be tattooed. Two separate studies carried out in 2004 and 2013 both found that tattooed women are perceived to be more sexually promiscuous than their untattooed counterparts. This imbalance in the social perceptions and acceptance of men and women with tattoos runs very much parallel with the way that our patriarchal culture treats the two binary genders. As we've seen, historically, tattooed women represent the rebellious and the revolutionary. And for the patriarchy, there's nothing that they fear more than an angry, strong woman. As women are constantly battling with the beauty standards that are imposed upon them by the media and by society, we're starting to see tattoos as a tool that can be used to redefine these conventional ideals and a way to form our own visions and definitions of what it means to be female. For myself and for many female identifying and female presenting individuals in the queer community, tattoos have become an important part of our appearance, which we formulate and we utilize to deconstruct the beauty standards that have been conditioned really by and for the male gaze. And in doing so, we can sort of form new definitions, I suppose, away from the heteronormative ideals of femininity. But equally, women are increasingly utilizing the political and the masculine connotations associated with tattoos, but doing so without necessarily losing their femininity and losing their female appearance. Many of my clients choose traditionally feminine designs and wear them almost like a kind of jewelry as a way to enhance their female form. And this is actually reminiscent of the ancient Egyptians for whom the women would adorn their skin with decorative patterns very reminiscent of the jewelry they wore. And it was very much considered a sign of beauty and of strength. But either way, what we're seeing is it's actually the rebellious act of tattooing in itself which women are using to really break down these outdated ideas of femininity. People often assume that I tattoo more women than men. And it's quite a lazy assumption based primarily on the aesthetic of my work, which is considered delicate and intricate and traditionally feminine. But actually, my client base covers all gender identities fairly evenly. And so what this demonstrates in itself is that it's also quite possible to subvert this idea that a tattoo must be a masculine accessory just through the choice of design that is worn. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to try and get through this quickly. My client, James, finds that his tattoos are referred to as feminine and girly, simply because of the subject matter of the tattoos. But to him, they're actually a true reflection of his own perceived gender identity, which is that of a young man who connects very much with the feminine aspects of life, just as much as the masculine. Now, you've all been given, or will be given, a temporary tattoo to take away with you. So even those of you who don't have permanent ink can experience what it's like to be perceived as a tattooed individual. And these designs are based on actual tattoos that I've done. And I wanted to pick these in particular because I feel like as much as you might want to try to categorize them according to, say, the lists that we looked at, or according to ideas of what tattoos for men or women would be, I think you'd be hard-pressed to assign a gender to these designs. I'm just going to finish with this, one of my favorite pictures, one of my favorite clients. And I just want to finish, sorry, I'm so over, by saying that tattoos represent such an important way to portray a greater spectrum of gender identities, because we can use imagery that would not usually be associated with our perceived gender and wear it in a way that really projects onto the world our identity and how we want people to see it. And the permanence of a tattoo, the symbolic nature of the permanence, is something which says this is not a phase, this is not temporary, this is a true expression of who I am and how I want you to see me. Thank you.
Thank you both. It was wonderful and intriguing. And the connections with gender that you finish with, Dominique, made me think about that and the permanence of tattoos, given the fact that we think about ways to undermine that permanence, and that there could be shifts in our sense of our own identity. So I wanted to ask you a little bit how, in your thinking and in your practice, you deal with people who suddenly feel that a tattoo they had is something they want to distance themselves from, the way they might about any other form of embodiment that they felt was fixed and anchored. Of course, I know you can just go through the process of removing them, but is that part of your experience? Or are they stable and people say, this is me, like my...
I think there's there's a way of, obviously, certain changes that we go through in life, we might like things less as we get older, especially the aesthetics of a tattoo. You know, we might change our mind about what we like to look at, or what something might mean. But I think there's an important lesson that you can learn from a tattoo, which is to maybe just accept and let go a bit, like let go of the negative association that you might have with something you no longer want, and just learn to see it as something that happened, something you did, you know, and just kind of let it be.
Traces of your life.
Yeah, you know, we can't, as much as we might want to erase certain parts of our life that maybe weren't the best, that we can't do that even if we try. And tattoo, if you have a tattoo of whatever that was, I think it can help you just sort of learn to move on from it, see it differently.
Becomes a memory, I suppose.
Yeah.
Back to gender, Chandler, I have to confess that I have been effectively made to associate scent with gender. So the first one for me was like walking in a forest. I loved it, but I could imagine wearing it, but also smelling it in a male body. Second one, to me, was female. And does that mean my connection with my brain has been definitively colonized by
marketing? And so the first one for you was masculine, the second one was feminine. How about
the second I could barely...
Oh, sorry. The first was feminine, the second was masculine. That's what you said, right? And the third?
The second I had a hard time identifying. I couldn't smell it. It was indeed like minimalist music.
You couldn't smell it, or you didn't?
No, I had a hard, this is my sensorium. I'm sure that I have some smelling handicaps. But the third one, to me, had a very gendered...
Which gender?
Female.
Female. Okay, the first one? Say it again.
Both, but more male, perhaps.
More male, okay. And the second one you just couldn't perceive?
Very, very lightly.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
And so what happens, I find, with smell, of course, as Proust has taught us and many others, is that it has profound and direct evocations.
Right.
So
this is so fascinating. Okay, so first of all, the first one, which you perceived as more masculine, is Black Orchid. It was creative directed by Tom Ford, and Tom is one of the great creative directors. And you know that fashion has colonized also perfume. Perfume was never associated with fashion until, oh God, what was her name? Coco Chanel was second, and is more famous, but there was a designer before who was a woman. What's that? No, he was a perfumer. This was a...
Thinking of a fashion.
Yes, Poiret. Paul Parquet was his perfumer. Yes, but he was not the first, I don't think. Fougère Royale was him? My God, I'm forgetting this. Anyway, I'm forgetting these things. So the first one was created by Tom Ford. Black Orchid was launched, its marketing was absolutely the quintessence of femininity. So it's supposed to be a feminine perfume, but this is what's interesting. Again, you never had this, and you know what culture has never been touched by this marketing? Arab culture. And they sell in Arab countries, it is exactly 50-50.
That's great.
And what's interesting, though, that even in the West, and with this aggressive, this woman who was a friend of Tom's, and he had her resemble this sort of thing, and she wore this thick lipstick, and very much sort of 1930s film goddess, it's still, they sell a huge amount to men, which really is, I think, a triumph of the actual work over the packaging, the marketing, the presentation. Okay? The second one, which you couldn't smell, it's one that was creative directed by Dries Van Noten and the designer Anne Frederick Malle. Beautiful, minimalist, Thank God Frederick does not gender. It's one of the geniuses. I mean, he's an extraordinary creative director. The concept of the works that he commissions as the patron of this art from these great artists, he has never gendered. It's extraordinary and good for him, okay? I think that it has been perceived as being more masculine. Again, it's ridiculous. I don't know. I'm very interested. What percentage have you perceived as masculine and feminine? Masculine? Feminine? Okay. Now, yeah, so fewer people feminine, and it definitely skews masculine. You do understand that everybody in this room, I'm sure, understands that that is something that's been imposed on us, in that you wouldn't look at, I don't know, like Renoir seems to me very, very feminine, incredibly feminine.
The bodies he painted, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but is that legitimate? Is he really for women, and what does that mean? The third one, en passant. Yes, so this one, and it skews, you said feminine. It's not marketed as
one or the other.
It's again Frederick Mall's collection. So we had a Frederick Mall, we had a Tom Ford, we had a Tom Ford Black Orchid, and then we had a Frederick Mall Minimalist, and then we had this, which was the hyper-realist. I don't know, lilac. Do you think? I understand why, because people associate flowers. It's associated with femininity traditionally and this sort of thing. It smells. I wear it all the time. It just smells great on a guy.
Well, now I guess I see hands going up. May I ask anybody who asks a question to line up and stand in front of the microphone, and please identify yourselves. And if I may, given the interest, ask brief questions.
Hi, my name is Akira. I wanted to address the scent as an artwork idea. I think that's important because, scent is one of probably the strongest sensory things. We remember things of scent going way back to our childhood and stuff. I'm actually allergic to perfume, so for me, it's almost like getting hit in the nose with a sledgehammer. So this analogy to music is interesting to me because I wonder if someone listens to the Sex Pistols and gets that same visceral illness that I sort of feel. But you would think I'd be anti-scent. It's actually the contrary. I think it's something I think about a lot. And I'm just wondering if there are scent artists out there that do things that are more subtle, because for me, it's like someone carrying around a boombox at like 110 decibels.
Right.
It's sometimes offensive.
But how did you perceive the second scent, the minimalist scent?
I didn't actually, I was scared, so I actually moved to the back.
Well, try it. I mean, it's extremely quiet. It's very, very quiet. It's like one of the Gymnopédies by Satie. It's just, do you understand why I would say that? I mean, it's just I think it's much quieter. Black Orchid is I hate to use the word violent, but it's just
intense,
huge.
Yeah,
I don't think but I mean, intense.
That's number one.
Certainly, but it's just the romanticist work is gigantic. There's a reason I say Rachmaninoff. So it covers you. It overwhelms you on purpose. That's the style. Try the second one. Okay. Try the Dries Van Noten.
Thank you.
My name's Ari. My question's for Dominique. I'm pretty heavily tattooed. Most of them have been done by men, and they've been great experiences. But the act of getting a tattoo is super vulnerable. It's also really transactional. And so I'm curious if you could speak to what you feel the ethical obligations of tattoo artists are to their clients.
Well, that's quite an interesting topic. There's actually, within the tattoo community, there's been very much a movement similar to the Me Too movement that's happening, where a lot of women have been coming forward and having had quite awful experiences with male tattooers, and people are starting to really call out this behavior, because I think there has always been quite an imbalance due to the real masculinization of tattooing, and the men behind tattoos. You know, they see it as something that is very strong and very, very masculine, and so they kind of play on that quite a bit. And the experiences that a lot of people have, and I'm not just talking about the sort of the more extreme and quite offensive experiences, but even just being in that environment, it can be quite an oppressive and quite a scary environment because of this sort of toxic masculinity that arises quite often in it. And I think what we're seeing these days with definitely the rise of the number of female tattooers and prominent women within the tattoo community is that is shifting now, and it's becoming much more of a experiential process where I think people understand that, like you say, it's a very vulnerable position you're putting yourself in. There's a lot of trust from both sides, and I think this realization that the trust has to be there and the experience has to be a positive one is really changing the way that tattoos are being done and tattooers are working and people are getting tattooed. I think, did that answer your question? I think I rambled, sorry.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Susan. I'm from the public and greatly appreciate the Institute and being able to be here. So I'm inviting a reflective comment. I had an experience here, and so I wanted to share that. I kind of deconstructed it inside myself. So it relates to shared space of speaker and listener, of speaker and listener as it relates to communication, both nonverbal and verbal, as it relates to gender, as it relates to embodied response. Okay. This relates to Mr. Burr. Speaker, listener, and activation. Okay, so when the speaker jumped onto the stage, I was like, oh my God, I'm engaged, I'm anticipating, I'm there. Then the speaker says, ready guys? And my embodied response is an immediate abrupt split. In that split, I knew I was not invited into the space as a listener. So with that split, I slightly removed myself. I slightly put a layer of defense, yet I could listen through the defense, but I knew I couldn't fully engage.
And now I have to maybe create more distance by just minding the time. But thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Matisse Dupont. I'm a master's student at Simmons University. So for me, part of what I'm coming up here is I'm a trans person, and both tattoos and perfume have been a huge part of my experience. And so what I'm curious for you is the way that both of these mediums are able to like queer the body and transform the body, and how that happens. And if you had anything to say about like the destabilization of the natural in your art forms.
Yes, I would say maybe we have time for one answer and one more question, and then I think we have to close.
Okay. Do you mind if I answer this one instead? I would say one thing. When I would go to Fire Island, I lived in New York for a long time. We're in LA now, but for a long time when I was going out to Fire Island, and of course there are tons of drag queens in Fire Island. Everybody does drag. It's really fun. And my friends, I was at the time, and I would meet these drag queens who were friends of mine, people I didn't know. And I would say, well, how, you're totally incomplete. What perfume are you wearing? And they would sort of go, oh my God, I never even thought of this. Because it is so obvious when you think about it. And then there was, what perfume, should I wear? Obviously organza for you. I had one of them wear, I can't even remember them right now, but they all started wearing their perfume, because drag queens tend to have a personality that they create. They would get one, and it would be part of their presentation. And they came to see it as absolutely essential to the presentation of the feminine as it is both represented,
Coded,
and it is subverted and this sort of thing. But it became part of that was integral to them, and I loved being part of that.
Last question, I'm afraid.
I have a question. I have a question about words used as tattoos. and whether there are some differences between men and women. When we talked last night, I told you about that tattoo at the Kinsey Institute over a man's penis that said "Nur für die Damen," very homophobic, only for the ladies. And I wonder, what kind of words do you see people choosing to tattoo on their bodies?
Thank you.
What sort of words? Oh, that's
A
interesting.
lot of times it's characters. They're taking them from Chinese or
Yeah,
Japanese.
yeah. I think actually, yeah, the trend in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s for especially, you know, Japanese kanji and things like that. Yeah, there was a real split, a definite split, and a very predictable one, I think. You know, men would be getting, you know, strong and, you know, very powerful kind of words. Whereas, yeah, for women, it would have been, you know, things that really represented, I don't know, beauty or, you know, their appearance in that way. But I think that trend has very much been and gone. I don't think it really, I think these days with the words that people get tattooed, it just tends to be very aspirational stuff. You know, people want things that represent their family or their strength in terms of their personality rather than aesthetically speaking. I think there has been a real shift, and I suppose it's become a bit more neutral in that sense.
That's very interesting. I just realized when you're saying that if I were ever going to get a tattoo, I would get words. I would never get an image.
But you would think...
I had never thought about that until this moment. I would absolutely get words.
Yeah.
Remember
Interesting.
that.
I'll remember that.
All right.
I want to thank Dominique and Chandler very much. And thank you all.